So I've been having this issue lately where when I'm editing, you and I's heads are like very different sizes because I'm like here and I'm not as tall a person as you. So yeah, I just. Anyway.
Hi there, I'm James.
And I'm Emme.
And welcome back to the Bestiary, Monster Manual A through Z. This week, Emme, we're continuing a dive into some of our favourite creatures in all of the Monster Manual. Who is it this week?
We are concluding our depths into dragons this week. Yes, closing it off with some of the most powerful of the dragons, nary the most powerful of the dragons, the red and gold.
So again, going with our kind of complementary elements, the red and gold being the most powerful of their kind, chromatic and metallic respectively, and if you ask me, kind of opposite archetypes, the red being the classic Western medieval dragon, the gold being much more closely linked to and inspired by more traditional Eastern interpretations of what a dragon is. But yeah, should we start with red?
Absolutely we should, and the red dragon would agree with you. You should always start with the red dragon according to them. They are, in a world of extremely powerful, vain, and greedy chromatic dragons, these guys are the most powerful, vain, and greedy chromatic dragons. They are top-notch. They believe themselves to be Tiamat's chosen dragons, and they will tell you about it.
And not without reason.
Oh, no. If you look at the art on this guy, he does kind of exude power. They have the biggest wings of any dragon, the greatest wingspan, and it's not a joke. This guy is like 50% wing.
That pose, I think, very much inhabiting that sense of power and aggression, the will to dominate.
You know, looking at it, and maybe this is just because I associate it with cats, which would be terrifying if they were bigger, but because they're cats and they're little and adorable, there's a part of me that can't get over the positioning of his arms. This, rawr, I'm gonna pounce on you. Rawr.
I mean, sure, if you could see that the cat was about to, like, exhale a firestorm from within itself. I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, if the cat was gargantuan. Might be less cute. And he is about to breathe fire on you. You can see the magic that's about to come out of his mouth. This guy, in this art, again, we're talking about ancient dragons in this series, and ancient red dragons lose the pupils in their eyes and they just look like molten magma. And you can see that right up here in this art. We've got these beautiful curling horns, this beautiful frill, those stripes. The wings on an ancient dragon fade to a molten black at the ends, and there's almost a metallic sheen to the edges of them, and that's very well illustrated here. The hindquarters are not as pronounced on this guy. This is a guy that leads really with his chest. He's for grabbing and flying and tearing apart.
In that sort of sense of being inspired by, like, classic dragons of medieval fantasy and very iconic creatures. I mean, of course, you know, Smaug the Magnificent comes to mind. Yeah, they are very much defined by aggression and a forward-facing approach to life and its problems, shall we say. So yeah, they also have that very kind of lithe rear, so they're huge and powerful, but also very quick, very deadly, very dexterous.
The way you're wording it just makes me think like they're the American Psycho of dragons. They're sitting there in that boardroom thinking about how they could destroy you.
I mean, hey, if you're going to ask a red dragon about its business card, it is going to be the best one in that boardroom. You know, mother of pearl.
It's perfect. And these guys, much in that way, though, they are extremely ambitious. They are a part of the world in a very unique way. They want to conquer and have a cult around them. They want to set up areas and villages around them that will actively worship them and do what they want. They want to be tyrants. They want to be in control of the world around them. They rarely associate with other dragons because they're the best. They are the best of all dragons, and therefore they don't need to associate with other dragons, but they do want to control them. If there's another dragon around and it's even touching its territory, it had better bow down to this red dragon.
Yeah,
or
because
will face the consequences.
They do, of course, see it as their natural born right to exist at the pinnacle of all living things and have, these cults and these groups of people that they can dominate is just, that's the way it should be. And so to have a red dragon with that kind of level of pride and arrogance, even consider deigning to deal with dragons of any other kind, it's going to have pretty extraordinary reason and confidence to do so.
Yes. And one of my favorite things about its lairs and the kind of things it likes to collect, because again, this one's terribly greedy. It wants to own and control things, but is particularly interested in the monetary value of its treasure. It wants to know what things are worth, and that is what makes it important to them. And I'm imagining having a conversation a little bit with this dragon where it has something you need, or it has taken something from you, and it looks you in the eye and goes, but what is it worth to you? Like, it recognizes monetary worth of things, which is also, again, the idea of this dragon being interested in the stock market.
Yeah, you live for 500 plus years, you're going to get pretty good at, watching those graphs.
Yeah, this guy's a billionaire. He's the worst. And he's just nasty. He will, again, collect things that have value. Maybe this meant something. It has provenance, and therefore it's got value. They're the worst. And so the area around an ancient red dragon's lair has one of the weirdest and most awful things that all chromatic dragons have. The environment is against you. When you're trying to get to a chromatic dragon's lair, the environment is 100% your enemy. But this one, it likes to live on mountaintops high up where it can be on top and control and lord over everything. Bonus points if it is, in fact, a volcano. But the fissures in the rocks will occasionally just form doors to the elemental plane of fire. Just straight up, you might trip over a rock and just fall into the elemental plane of fire completely on accident. And because of that, there are creatures from the plane of fire just walking around.
Yep. And, if you're particularly hapless, you might find yourself falling down a crevasse. And when I first came across this, I was like, makes sense that particularly if a dragon lairs in a volcano, it might open fissures and you'd have like magma and molten rock and things spewing out. No, the literal plane of fire.
Literal plane of fire. Yeah, it does. It has that. It has some magma. Like there are earthquakes, and in its lair, I think its lair actually is it can shoot 120 feet away from it. It can make a geyser of magma that's 20 feet high. So it'll do stuff like that to you. That's a little bit more terrifying, but traditional. But yeah, no, just literal fire. Oh man, because it again pulls into the idea of if you have to get to it, and getting to it sucks. The plane of fire is miserable. The things that crawl out of it are just the worst they are is horribly inconvenient. Like it's
and that's what I think is so evocative of dragons in general, particularly the chromatic dragons, where you're probably there to try and fight it. Is that they're not just a combat encounter. They're not just a villain. They're not just an enemy. They're not just a monster. They are a character and an adventure in their own right.
Yes.
As you say, even just getting near them is a challenge.
And then you have to fight the stupid thing. So the other reason that we paired these two, as we were saying, is because they're the most powerful. These guys are challenge rating 24. So these guys are very literally the most powerful dragons. They have frightful presence. Again, these guys are both going to be fire breathing. So these guys have an incredibly powerful fire breath. They have a +7 to stealth.
Stealth dragon.
Stealth dragon. We've covered this before when we did Shadow Dragon. The idea of a giant dragon sneaking up on you is hilarious, but it's a red dragon. I'm just imagining it like hanging upside down in the top of this magma-filled cave, just staring at you, waiting to screw up. And it's manipulative like that. They will probably watch you for a minute as you're walking up to its lair. Because it's a jerk like that.
I mean, most dragons are, but they're smart enough to fight you or engage with you in such a way that is going to be the most beneficial to them. And if that involves hiding, it's going to do that. It's
going to do that. Because this is a guy who's in charge of everything. The other thing is, if you're there, you've gotten through all of its defenses. This guy really likes to have minions. It really likes to have underlings. And so if you've gotten all the way to it, either it's let you there or it's going to be really, really peeved.
Or some combination of the two. So gold dragons, of course, in many ways similar to the red. They share the element of fire. They share just the sheer power and majesty that they possess, but also in many ways they're polar opposites. These guys are defined by their good nature, and so will often be very much involved in the world in the same way that a red dragon might be, but the gold dragon will never want to acknowledge or have its presence acknowledged, so it will hide in plain sight as turning into an animal or a humanoid, perhaps leading a lost child home as a very shiny deer or something like that.
Shiny deer. It's an image. Just It's beautiful, but also kind of like this is funny to me. I don't know why the idea of this giant dragon.
And also in terms of the what I would say the cultural inspiration behind the look of these guys, whereas the red dragon is very typical of what you would associate with more Western medieval fantasy. The gold is much more, to me, of an Eastern look, and this is obviously best portrayed in the art. Just starting with that facial expression, it has that sort of very wise, philosophical, sage-like look to it. It has those multiple mustaches, and then the wings not being kind of separate limbs in the way that they are with red and other dragons, but more sails almost that extend the entire length of the body, as you might expect, of course, from a gold dragon. It is glorious in its metallic nature, and as they age, they tend to take on a kind of a darker, more rusty hue. The eyes become these pools of molten gold almost, and very much have the look of the most powerful and respected of the metallic dragons.
Talking about these wings here, the span is not very huge, unlike what we were just talking about with the red dragons, where they have these huge wings. The first limb, the primary limb that the rest of the wing extends off of, it's very muscular, but it's much more thin. This guy, it looks much more dexterous. His limbs almost look delicate. They're strong, but they're not as huge.
Yeah.
Everything about him is a little more gentle in that way.
Exactly. I mean, the manual describes how gold dragons almost seem to swim through the air, sort of undulating their body, and moving kind of how you might imagine one of these creatures moving underwater, whereas the red dragon with just that sheer wingspan is going to be able to fly through pure power and size, whereas the gold dragon is much more elegant, much more graceful in terms of both its look and the manner in which it acts.
That dual frill you're talking about, it would lend to that imagery. Everything about it's got that graceful wind beneath the wings look. You can imagine everything just gently rippling like a kite. He's really glorious.
Yeah. These guys like to eat money and have a particular fondness for gems. So probably one of the more unique reasons for hoarding treasure troves among dragons, just it quite likes the taste of it, to be honest.
It's so odd to me. Yeah, it says in the book it can eat almost anything but prefers gold and pearls.
Yeah. And to me, while that's a fun little detail, it kind of makes sense given this dragon's nature, because it isn't hoarding to be able to demonstrate its power or its wealth or its interesting collection of things. It's as simple as that it's what it eats.
Yeah.
And so, in fact, its good nature is reflected in its diet. It hoards this simply because it's what it needs to survive, and not because it's doing it for any other more complicated reason than that.
Yeah, and it sounds like it might get something that it likes, but it doesn't. Yeah, it's not really hoarding it for power reasons or anything like that. It doesn't want you to steal it. It does put magical wards up around all of its things. But again, that's more, I think, just to kind of keep you from bothering with its stuff. The description on the social nature of dragons is that it just doesn't want to deal with people anymore. And like, same gold dragons, I feel this so deeply. I'm just imagining if you got too close to a gold dragon's lair, it would be very much like a "you kids, get off of my lawn" kind of deal. That the gold dragon might just pop up and be like, What?
Yeah. And I think it's another example of the ways in which all these individual little details intersect quite nicely, because they are inherently good in nature. They are very philosophical, sage-like. They're mystics almost, and so they do have this kind of world weariness to them. That yes, they will do the right thing, they'll help out where they can, but just leave them alone otherwise, please.
They don't really seek out the company of others, unlike a lot of other chromatic dragons, which will actively seek out company or stories or jokes, depending on the dragon, of course. But
I mean, a copper dragon, this is not.
No. If you told this dragon a joke, it might just blink very slowly at you before asking you nicely to leave. Other dragons will seek it out much. Again, comparing and contrasting to the red dragon, other metallic dragons see the gold dragons as some of the best of them. And so they will seek them out to learn their wisdom and their ways. But alternatively, the gold dragon really doesn't like to keep the company of anyone other than its mates or maybe its kids. It's tired. And I imagine being that wise, being that intelligent, and living that long, it could really lend you to feeling grumpy sometimes. You've probably been disappointed more than once.
Well, and it's almost like, to me, when you get particularly powerful examples of these creatures, it's almost like, as the most powerful of dragons, of metallic dragons anyway, that it's almost like they're not so tethered to the actual world, and so perhaps aren't as concerned with like mundane problems that people might come to it investigating. And this, you can see in its lair and regional effect actions. The dragon can see the future.
Yep. It's very much connected to the world of dreams and time.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit beyond us.
And so, like, from a mechanic standpoint, in combat, one of these creatures is able to just give itself advantage on basically everything because it can see the future.
Yep.
And as well as that, it can basically create its own little pocket dream world and teleport somebody there until they find a way out of it.
I imagine it's mystical timeout.
That element of mysticism, I think, comes through really strongly with them. The area around their layers can be kind of infused with this mysterious, otherworldly mist that is kind of filtered through from the world of dreams. It can speak to you telepathically in your dreams if you're near enough to it. And, like, you don't wake up going like, oh, what a weird dream. You're like, no, I just had a conversation with the dragon.
Yeah. And again, that comes back to the "get off my lawn, you stinking kids." I'm just imagining you getting close enough to this gold dragon and you going into it and going into your rest and dreaming about this dragon going, "What?
What do you want?
What do you want? Why are you here? For the love of gods, why are you here? I'm so tired. You adventurers think you can just climb up on my mountain and talk to me about whatever. You stinking kids." Though, I do imagine, especially because, as we've talked about with a lot of chromatic dragons, I don't imagine there's large circumstances where you're going to be fighting one of these things. I imagine more often than not, you're going to be going to it looking for information, advice, or help. And I imagine it would almost be a little bit hard to get this guy to care.
I mean, anything's possible, of course, in D&D, but I struggle to think of common reasons that you have for coming into conflict with creatures, and just this creature's inherent good nature even if you are opposed to it in some way, it might just see you as like not worth its time.
Yeah, you might just
not
be
that it's
inconvenient.
arrogant in that sense, but it does just have this natural sense of detachment from the world.
Yeah, I mean, if it could spend its time better doing literally anything else, it's not necessarily so interested in you. And the other thing I know, this guy has a lot. I just noticed this guy also has a high stealth. He's got a +9 to his stealth. He's a giant gold butterfly. But he has a +17 to perception, +16 to persuasion. Oh, yes, +16 to persuasion. So this guy, he knows where things are. He knows where you are. He could make an excellent argument. He could absolutely convince other things around him to do things. I'm imagining mostly him convincing other dragons to do a thing, because other dragons would look up to this person and do as they ask. But that's just what I'm thinking, because I can't imagine what other person a gold dragon would be convincing to do literally anything.
I just find it quite satisfying in that kind of poetic way that, you know, often things are about contrast. That the most powerful red dragon is defined by its will to dominate and its power and its arrogance. And the most powerful gold dragon, the most powerful of good dragons, is a simple philosopher hermit that wants to be left alone.
May we all be so lucky. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of The Bestiary. Have you ever fought against the tyrant of a red dragon? Have you ever been told to get off the lawn of a gold dragon? Tell us about it in the comments down below. We'd really like to hear about it. And while you're there, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like, hit that bell so you know when we upload more videos. You can subscribe, check out our social media, and if you want to support us just a little bit more, you can check out our Patreon. Here are some more videos, and join us next week when we delve deep into the waters of the dragon turtle.